Issue 7 features new work by 5 writers, as always. This time, Valerie Witt, I believe she's a Californian writer, who's... Okay, so I write this out, and it reads better than what it reads out loud, probably, so it's a bit thick and condensed. Whose epistolary Gothic narrative startles us with a language of ardor that runs alongside being. Masha Tupitsin, whose Real Men Nouveau Romanly disorients us while compelling us to evaluate just what kind of relationship a contemporary relationship is. And I should say that Masha, who lives in New York, will be reading at our Coming Envelope launch in Montreal on May 24th at Drawn and Quarterly. I'm really excited to meet her and to hear her read. She's a great writer. Moaz Sarani, whose end paper poems spatialize quotidian events like maps of soft desires. He's not here tonight, even though he lives in Toronto. But yeah, I know. Jesse Huskin, whose planning consultation reconstellates the black noise of Toronto, bringing the background to the foreground and turning object words into word objects. And he is here tonight. I'm really happy that he's here. And Kyle Buckley, whose prose slips warninglessly from critical to personal in effective and beautiful collisions. And Kyle's here to read with us tonight. He's also the author of The Laundromat Essay, another work which has beautiful collisions of criticality and personalness. So I'm really happy to welcome Kyle Buckley to the stage.
Personalness. I'm just going to read these notes that have been left up here that are about other writers. I'm happy to be here tonight because I think that Malcolm does a really fantastic job with his journal, The Coming Envelope. And also I have strange and fond memories of a long time ago traveling to, by the TTC, traveling to J. Millar's house to buy strange works of literature from his Apollinaires bookshop, which was in his house. And those were some formative reading experiences for me. And Jay's nice. So I have a piece that has been, I have a text that's been published in this edition of The Coming Envelope, which is quite a handsome journal. And it's an excerpt, it's sort of an excerpt from a longer piece, and I'm going to read right from the journal tonight, which I feel is, I haven't looked over the copy or even read over the copy, which I feel could be the sign of a disaster of some kind if I were to just simply read it out loud, but I will anyway. And I think that feeling of a kind of impending disaster is an important one when you think about when I think about the fact that this is sort of a text that's been excerpted from a longer project, and I have a lot of conflicted feelings about that. So there's a lot of disaster all the way around. And in preparing some remarks for this evening, I thought about that feeling, and I thought about a writer that I admire a great deal, a Lithuanian writer named Giedra Radvila-Viesiūtė. And there are probably a lot of people here that pronounce Lithuanian better than I do, so they can criticize me for that later. But she wrote a piece called The Allure of the Text that I admire quite a lot. And in this piece, she lists criteria for what she considers an effective text, and she gives examples. And so the first one, she says, first, after the text has been read, the narrative must force its way back into the memory involuntarily, not necessarily because of its plot or its characters, perhaps only thanks to its details, similes, metaphors, or other unexpected aspects. And then she goes on to complete a list of, or to make efforts to complete a list of 5 individual criterion for her effective text. But notably, when she gets to the 5th one, she says, 5th, whenever I want to formulate something completely in its totality, I panic. All the assertions I've voiced become arguable and ephemeral. And I thought that that feeling of panic is important to me, but I'm trying to sort of replace that feeling with a more prolonged sense of loss, because I think that's a noble goal. So this is sort of anyway, this is kind of an excerpt of sorts. I published an essay in a literary review on not knowing the titles of poems. I want to say that I argued for a meaningfulness to come from this phenomenon of temporary loss, as though there were a literary quality in forgetting the titles of poems. I'm going on a short trip to New York, and this is what they want me to talk about at a conference there. If there was a description of a poem, and there were both beauty and force, and you aren't thinking of the title of anything, or if you are, nothing can come to mind except that in my mind what you were supposed to remember had been obliterated. Take these lines, for instance, from a particular poem. I still can't figure out how to get past the post office to the swings in the park. Some trees blossom in the cold, not from conviction. And my hair is the color of dandelion fluff. Suppose this poem were about you. Would you put in the things I've carefully left out, descriptions of pain and sex, and how impulsively people behave toward each other? I get from the check-in line to U.S. Customs at the airport, and that's when I realized that I actually forgot my wallet when I packed, and only by chance happened to have shoved into my pocket the American money I'd changed that day and my passport. I guess I have exactly what I need, but only barely. Literature is a singular thing, always the only thing capable of being its own contradiction. That's different than what someone like James Wood would write. He wants literature to be like a singular sentence that reads unremittingly, like a long onrush, formally controlled, joyously messy, propulsive but self-interrupted, attired but disheveled, careful and lawless, right and wrong. It seems right, but it isn't. It's too much and it hasn't left out enough. None of it changes the fact that you have no idea how much I'm affected by singular things. I lost track of what you were saying when you said something about my tone. It's as though my tone caused injury to you. I told you that I don't think I can keep having conversations like this anymore. I still should have called you from the airport. I want to respond to something James Wood said. Criticism lasts when it becomes literature. I don't want to disagree with that. After all, isn't it what we actually want, those of us who went to school for literature? We seem desperately sure that we're a part of a critical act that accrues as literature. Of course, we've been fighting a lot lately. Do you remember our last fight? In theory, any of the literariness was stripped away, although maybe that's what was left as ammunition for us when you consider everything that we said. Like, yours are my greater sorrows, theories with no apology, other things like that. Does literature ever answer the question, how do you resist something you're right in the middle of? It wasn't supposed to be an argument, except maybe in a literary sense. I don't think you know how angry you sound sometimes. You said maybe I contradict you so readily just to prove how much I believe in everything you say. I'm not fully convinced of the connection between these two thoughts, but it might be better than the alternative. You told me the whole time I was away there were no descriptions of pain or sex. There was nothing about the impulses of people's behavior toward each other. We trade messages when I get back. I try to both ignore but also kind of playfully recall the way we talk to each other when we're angry. I know I told you I had a meeting after work with an editor who had assigned me to write an article on a John Ashbery poem, a good chance to write something longer, more explanatory. So I get up to the office, and when I leave the meeting, I catch a taxi, and by then I'm starving. I call you, and I think it's funny to say, this is the phone call of least resistance. I narrate the scene as I go past an accident in a park. You have a bit of a headache, and something happened to you that day, but still we meet for a drink later, near where I live. What would you have put in that I've carefully left out? A description of pain? Then there'd have to be a description of pain. There would have to be a description of sex.